Hello everyone and welcome to my review for the film Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. This movie was directed by Bayona, and without further ado, let's get right into my review. Guys, I found this movie to be extremely disappointing, and especially for a Jurassic World movie or a Jurassic Park movie, this movie really was not good for me personally. And I'm a really big fan of Jurassic Park and a really big fan of Jurassic World as well to some extent. But Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom did not work for me. For the most part. In fact, I was quite disappointed by it, and I thought it was actually a pretty bad movie. Let's start by talking about the acting in this film. Of course, the two main actors of this film are Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, who are reprising their roles from the original Jurassic World, which was directed by Colin Trevorrow. So, Chris Pratt plays Owen Grady in this movie, and what I loved about Owen Grady in the first film was kind of the charm he had in the first film. Now, I will say that Owen Grady as a character is one of Chris Pratt's more serious characters. There isn't a lot of room for comedy for this character in the writing of the first movie as well. In the script, there wasn't much comedy from this character, but there was certainly a lot more. And not just comedy, I would say. There was a lot more charm to Chris Pratt's character in the first film. And in this movie, Chris Pratt just looked completely bland, and the writing just did not serve him well in this film. The movie treated him as a very serious character, and again, as I said, he's supposed to be a more serious character than some of his other roles, but he completely lost that kind of charm that he had in the first film, and that really hurt the movie for me, because in the first film he has kind of this larger-than-life, charming personality, and in this movie I really didn't feel that. Bryce Dallas Howard, in the first film, her character is really interesting because she plays the owner or manager, or the manager of Jurassic World, and she was kind of like this, she had this very unique character where she wanted to be in control of everything. And that was really the only thing that her character had going for her in the first film. To be very honest, there isn't a lot of characterization or character development even in the first Jurassic World, but I will say it worked in that film because the plot of the film and script of the film for the rest of the things was really, really good. In this movie, you really feel the fact that there isn't a lot of good character development or characterization for our two main characters, and on top of that, the performances were not charming or interesting. Bryce Dallas Howard in particular was just completely stone cold, expressionless, and bland throughout this film. The performances in this movie from our two main actors were actually really, really weak. There are plenty of other characters in this movie as well, including a bunch of side characters who added absolutely nothing to this film. Honestly, they were some of the most honestly embarrassing characters to have in this movie because they were complete caricatures, complete stereotypes. The writing was completely lacking for these characters, and honestly, there was no purpose for them being there. They just ate up screen time and were added in to the mix to add some more peril into the movie. But honestly, they added nothing. They didn't even add to the peril of the movie, and they felt like stereotypes, like caricatures. They were not fleshed out at all. The villain of this movie was so cheesy, so predictable. It felt like I was watching a cartoon, honestly. I absolutely despised the villain of this movie. He was so cheesy, and he was adding absolutely nothing to the film. And the fact that they had an antagonist, they had kind of that sort of antagonist, a human antagonist in the first film as well, but I felt like he was a little less cheesy. His intentions were a little bit more interesting. In this movie, without giving away any spoilers, the villain's dialogue, his intentions all felt so cheesy. I felt like I was watching literally just a cartoon, and I mean that in a kind of negative way because it felt cheesy and it felt predictable, and I did not enjoy the human antagonist villain in this film at all. The first half of this movie plays out like a very typical sci-fi action summer blockbuster film, but honestly what's missing from the first half is the kind of charm and wonder that was present in both Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. So what you're kind of left with is a bunch of needless characters with our two main kind of now boring characters just running around and doing really repetitive action sequences, and there was just nothing to differentiate this film, or the film's first half, I should say, in terms of doing anything unique. It was just absolutely kind of a chore to watch the first half of the film. It was just extremely repetitive, and I never even felt like there was this real sense of tension, a real sense of suspense that was there in the first half. All of that was gone. It was an extremely boring, kind of very bland first half, and already I was like kind of disheartened by that, because even the first Jurassic World, even though it borrowed kind of story elements from the first Jurassic Park, what I liked about it was that it was able to build up some tension and suspense while also keeping kind of the original kind of wonder and charm of the first Jurassic Park. But this movie has none of these things, and it honestly feels like kind of boring, and there's absolutely nothing really interesting going on. It's extremely kind of just a bunch of cliche summer blockbuster tropes mashed together, and I was really bored out of my mind for the first half of this film. The second half of this movie is interesting because it's where director J.A. Bayona, I believe, really comes into his wheelhouse by giving the second half of the film a very B-horror movie kind of feel. For me personally, while I do think this take was interesting and definitely helped to invigorate the movie after a really honestly bland and derivative first half, personally I think that this approach isn't necessarily the best for Jurassic Park, or Jurassic World I should say, because honestly the movie already has a kind of a B-movie sci-fi feel to it, and kind of giving it and forcing a horror kind of genre onto it felt a little bit too exaggerated and honestly a little bit too silly. That said, I respect J.A. Bayona for trying to do something different, trying to do something original, trying to do something unique. And yes, I will say definitely invigorated the movie for me a little bit at least, because honestly the first half was just that boring. But at the end of the day, what he does in the second half is really too little too late at this point, because trying to mash the two genres of the first half and the second half, it really didn't mash together really well, and as I said, it felt kind of silly in the second half, and the plot itself was so weak and so convoluted by this point, with so many side characters and weird subplots that were abandoned from the first half or just barely mentioned in the second half, that at this point I really didn't care what kind of, genre take that the director goes for, and it felt like too little too late. I do respect J.A. Bayona for trying to do something different, but it just didn't make up for it for me. That said, what I do enjoy about the second half is kind of some of the visual imagery that we get. There are some really cool shots that are present in the second half because of his unique kind of B-horror movie take. You get a lot of cool, interesting shots with dinosaurs in the dark doing some cool things. And honestly, the second half felt like a haunted house movie, but with dinosaurs, which sounds silly, and it is actually quite silly, but I gotta give it to J.A. Bayona, it was something unique, and I do appreciate that part of it. There's one particular scene that I thought was really well executed and honestly pretty scary, and it's better than the first half, but as I said, I really didn't care for this new take because I don't feel like it really fits the movie well, or fits the Jurassic Park or Jurassic World identity that well. And second, because it was too little too late, and there was too many kind of convoluted plot problems with the story at that point that I just didn't really care for the new style of genre that J.A. Bayona was going for. Appreciate its uniqueness, but it didn't ultimately make an impact on me. So for me, overall, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom felt honestly either very derivative or very incomplete. A lot of the plot didn't make sense, or there were some plot points that were just kind of barely mentioned on the second half, and it just didn't come together in a coherent, cohesive way. And it ended up kind of feeling boring and derivative at the end of the day. I wish that there had been something else to do in this movie, but to be fair, honestly, in my opinion, this is kind of a franchise where you can only do so much. And I think that what they set up at the end of this movie, without giving any spoilers, will help to kind of stretch out the franchise into one other movie. But after that, I think they should just be done with this franchise. And that's coming from a fan. I don't think there's much left to explore in the franchise. A lot of the stuff is starting to feel really repetitive. A lot of the material feels repetitive in this movie from Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. And a lot of that wonder and charm, despite the fact that, it might potentially be possible in the third movie that kind of wonder and charm comes back, it's starting to get lost a little bit. I definitely felt it in this movie. Maybe it was just the script, but I also think partially it was because I don't think there's a lot more left to be done with this franchise. So I think it's almost about time for this franchise to retire. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom was a bit of a disappointment to me because I was expecting something a little bit more from this kind of franchise, but at this point I feel like it's starting to wear out and tire out by itself. So I don't know what you guys thought about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I know that this movie has done really well in terms of box office, in terms of business, and a lot of audiences have also responded pretty well to it. Critics were kind of mixed on it as well. So let me know what you thought in the comments down below, and also tell me what you think about the Jurassic World franchise, where it's headed, if you've already seen the movie or if you want to see more movies. For me, I personally think that they can do one more and I'll go see it, but they should definitely stop after that. Alright guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all those great things, and I'll see you guys next time in another video.